I reflect on this a lot. I reflect on it, but we're stuck. We go and the wheel keeps spinning and time keeps marching on. The same kids are running in the hallway, though not maybe to the extent that they were at the beginning of the year, but it's still happening. Measures are put in place for support, but it's not enough. And it's not there's not been a drastic enough change in anything to help where we are with public education.
I wish I knew how much I miss not knowing that we're all screwed.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually, it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFleur. Welcome to Taught, the podcast. Today I have my friend Jen with us. Jen has taught for 18 years. And the last few years, she's done something very interesting, I think. She has worked as a teacher in a special program that is embedded in the district she works in. Jen is a Montessori teacher in a Montessori program in a public school system. And that's just a mind blower for me. Until I began work in this school district, the one that she is in, I had never known that anything like this even existed. Today, Jen will tell us a little bit about her job, her thoughts on these types of programs that are embedded in the public system, and also let us know where she is in terms of burnout as she comes to the close of her 19th year of teaching. Jen, thanks so much for agreeing to do this, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm happy to share with you today.
So tell us a little bit about what brought you to education and kind of what this has looked like for you being a teacher.
So I'd worked retail. After I graduated from high school, I attempted college for the first time, and that did not work out for me so well. When my son was 2 and I was 28, I was done working retail. It had been a crazy Christmas season, and someone that I know had taken a couple of classes at the college, and I was like, I can do that. I can go back to school. And so I took one class over that summer, got a 4.0, and I was like, I can definitely do this. At that point, I didn't know that I was necessarily going to go into education, but it was a thought that I had. And then, finished my AA degree and went to the Western Washington teaching program locally here, and then graduated and have been working as a teacher ever since. I'm ending my 6th year in the Montessori program, or it could be my 7th. That's been a great journey. I really do I love my program, and I love what I'm doing. I teach 4th and 5th grade, and there are 6 classrooms in our building that have Montessori multi-age classes. I love that I've gotten to know families over time. I've had multiple siblings in my class. We have a rich environment for education and being able to add different elements into what we're doing as teachers.
So that program works by parents applying to get in and then going on a waiting list.
So we have a lottery at first. We're generally full from the lottery system. We have one classroom that's just for one grade level, and that's kindergarten. And then then they split the kindergartners into the three first, second, and third grade classes. And then from there, they go up to fourth and fifth grade, and there are two fourth and fifth grades. We have had room in our classes because we can have up to 24 kids, and there's only 18 kids that come up. So that leaves us usually a little bit low. So we've gotten some students late into the Montessori program. That has its own challenges because they don't have the same training as the other students do in the basis of how to learn.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting program and a different way of looking at how a classroom can be set up because that group of kindergartners, like you said, gets split into one of two classrooms. And in that classroom, those kindergartners will go in as first graders and they will be in with second and third graders. So it's a 1, 2, 3 classroom. And the second graders mentor the first graders, the third graders mentor the second graders, and everybody is doing things the same way using some really good learning routines and at the same time learning at their level.
We really try to focus on each individual child, um, but also we have the parameters of our state standards, and we use district curriculum. It's an interesting process how we weave everything together to make sure we're doing all of the things that we need to do, which
Well, and this leads us into
sometimes.
burnout because
Yes.
you and I have had some discussions about this. And I mean, just having a regular public education expectation from a district has quite a bit of pressure. But you have the
Yes.
additional pressure of teaching more than one grade level simultaneously, as well as doing it according to the Montessori method in that framework. So just the levels of expectation and um, pressure. I'm just going to go back to the word pressure on that program has to be enormous. So having said all of that, this could be, I was thinking these embedded programs, because this is not the only one, right? There's also the dual language programs where kids can learn
Yep.
a second language as they're coming up through their elementary education. That one's out there too. And I think sometimes we do not give teachers who, because it's kind of a choice to go into that program. You know, I know you had to go to specialized classes and trainings to be able to do this, correct?
Yes. Yes, I have a Montessori teaching certificate along with my bachelor's degree. So,
So lots of
uh,
extra hoops, but man, these programs, the teachers who choose to be in them are really pushing themselves, in my opinion.
um, I believe that we are. um, it's interesting because the general education teachers, even within our own building, they don't know all of the hoops that we have to jump through to do what we're doing. Um, and I would say, like, ground level for us is the amount of communication and expectation of our parents that are involved. There's
Yep.
a volunteer requirement to be in our program, and we're still in the space of trying to retrieve our volunteers after COVID made it so that we could not have any volunteers.
In a
Which
program
that
that is built on needing volunteers.
Yes, yes. So we're working on the parents to get them back in and inviting them and being, it's very open. Which that was a transition for me. Also, in trying to find work for all of my volunteers to do um, in the classroom after teaching in a single grade classroom and doing everything myself. It was interesting because there's a lot more communication involved. But now that I've been doing it a while, it's gotten easier. I would say that talking to a whole room of adults is not my favorite activity, but it's forced me to power through that kind of fear that I have. And so it's gotten easier over time.
Yeah, I had another guest say transparency is its own ball of wax, but it also brings a different dynamic that actually isn't a bad thing. And when you have all of those parents in, you don't get more transparent than that. They see everything that's going on.
Honestly, that could be one of the ways that we addressed some things that are wrong with education. If we could get more people coming into our spaces and volunteering to help, to see, to guide the kids, that might end up being where we could make the biggest gains.
I think you might be onto something. Well, I think that we could probably do one whole podcast just on these embedded programs and the different dynamics of those. But I am going to bring us back to burnout. And so this podcast is meant to be a safe space for educators to talk about burnout and share our stories about what we're seeing and what we think might be leading to this burnout. And you and I have talked a lot over the years about burnout, even before the pandemic. We were talking about this. So, how are things going this year?
I haven't 100% pulled back from everything, but I am going to be pulling some of my time back from some of the extra committees that I'm on, or working on certain district mandates that I have been doing, so that I don't feel pulled in so many directions and can focus more on what I need to focus on, with my own classroom and with my family. I think that the tiredness level or worry about so many things. For instance, I'm going to use my math scores. They have not been great over the last couple of years after we were forced to just go straight back into state testing. Right, the year we came back to school when we were all still wearing masks.
I just brought this up in another podcast. Because the person I was interviewing said, yeah, when we came back, our district said, you have time to assimilate, get the kids assimilated, get them back into the mode of learning. And we all thought that's what we were going to do. And the second weekend, it was like, okay, and by the way, we need to start this testing.
100%. We were so shocked because we thought we were going to be given the gift of time,
Yeah.
to help our students get back into just the learning environment. It it was hard for a lot of them after being home and not having a teacher to ask the questions, because parents don't always know. Parents were struggling too through the whole thing, trying to work and have their kids on Zoom meetings, trying to figure out what they were learning and help them as much as they could, or they had no time at all to help their children. So um, it was it was shocking that ended up being the case, and we tried to do our best. Though I really do think, as especially with math, that is still our biggest hill that we're having to climb. Students are I'm finding students are having a hard time retaining math facts. Like, my fourth and fifth graders are still using their fingers to add and subtract. And then multiplication facts, as fourth and fifth grade, they usually in the past have come in proficient with their multiplication facts, because we're multiplying and dividing multi-digit numbers, and then we add decimals in, and then we add fractions in, and all of those things without having that strong basis. There's a struggle, and it's daily, and there are tears. So then we take some steps back and we review and we try a different method and we play games and we bring in brownies like I did yesterday, to work on fractions and figuring out common denominators in any way that maybe they're going to remember going forward. That's one of my biggest concerns and pieces of burnout, because those are the things that keep you awake at night. How can I
So,
help my kids remember?
so when you say, I asked about burnout and your response was, I'm taking a couple of steps back. I am prioritizing me and my family. So what I'm hearing now is that you've had 2 years of trying to use the tools that you have to get the students where they need to be. It's been a Herculean effort. I know math is your specialty. The listeners probably don't know that, but I know that. I know that that has always been your specialty. And to see that your efforts can't get the gains that not only you would like for your students to have, but that the district, the state, the country is expecting of you. It seems like what I'm hearing from you is you are giving yourself the grace that maybe those systems aren't giving you and saying, I'm doing what I can, and I'm not going to take this burden on my shoulders 100% anymore. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, you are. I don't want to show frustration to my students with their inability for whatever reason to remember or stay focused. We'll pause and go back. Let's try this again because it, I could also talk about resiliency for probably two more podcasts. Um, but and that's where the tears come because they think there's this mindset with students at this point that they think everything should come easy, that they think they should just be able to get it, putting in the hard work and trying again and pausing because also they're quick to like, oh, I made a mistake, I'm going to erase everything, and I'm asking them to pause and let's think through. um and it's a journey and it's hard for everyone, but I'm not giving up. um I'm not giving up on them, but I know that that's our biggest struggle in the classroom. To go back to the what I'm pulling myself back from, I'm taking myself off of some committees that I've been on for much longer than I first anticipated that I was going to be. Just being part of the Montessori program, we already have extra meetings and expectations. And so I need to try to stay focused on that because I want our program to continue to thrive. Some of the bigger things that I've been involved in, I'm going to have to step away from. It will be hard. One of them is equity, but now I feel like other people need to get involved and need to learn um, without having a few people in the building be the experts, or as much as we could be possibly called that. Everyone needs to step up and do the work.
I think this is an issue with committees in general, and we're talking at the in the elementary schools. A lot of times you have to join something. So we've got all these little things that we're trying to do in the building. Which one are you going to join? And some people end up on two or three of them. And of course, like everything else, we have the joiners like yourself and me, where I'm like, let's get some stuff done. And then we have the people that show up because they've been made to, and there's never a lot of follow through. And so essentially it's an hour of your time for a meeting that nothing happens in. And that is very frustrating, especially when we're talking about something to me that's huge, like equity. And there's many other ones too. PBIS is another one, which is the positive behavior intervention systems. Those
And
are huge. And when nothing comes out of them, it's very frustrating and detrimental to buildings. Yeah, I think
um,
this is really a good point you're bringing up, because these initiatives are really important. And I do think they fuel burnout, because I know that if there is a problem in my environment, I feel the need to be a part of the solution. And in education, there are so many problems. And there are so many ways that teachers can be involved outside of being a classroom teacher. And just being a classroom teacher takes every ounce of us. So it is this push pull guilt trip that we live with all the time.
Yes, it is. Um, every day. And then, let's pile on our own families and sports and activities and your husband needing attention. Um, and that's where, being the super mom, and I'm I'm like a type B. I don't know if anybody's seen the type B teacher memes or Instagram videos, where it's like my desk is messy. Oh, but so is my laundry room, and so is my living room. And I'm gonna like dust. I'm gonna fold these things right here, and that's good for today. Um, but trying to do it all as much as we possibly can. And that's where the burnout comes because it's never enough. Um, and, you know, it's not sustainable because we get sick if we're doing too much and we don't have downtime and we don't have time to regroup and recenter our brains. Um, and everything's just go, go, go. Uh, and I look at the new teachers. There's a lot of new teachers right now, and and they don't necessarily, they don't have the background in possibly, I'll just say classroom management, or, coming into education and already being a mom, you see things differently than someone that's coming straight out of college. And um, the way we manage kids is different. Um, and trying to show or help, it's hard. There's tons of behaviors also all over the place in every building. It is a struggle. um, there are kids that just are running the hallways, um, and everyone's really trying to do their best to get the kids what they need. But then I think that because of that, there's other things that are lacking.
Yeah. I mean, if your resources are spent dealing with behaviors, there's not much left over if you have a lot of behaviors.
Yes.
So, this is not the first time that this has come up in these interviews. It seems, again, no matter who I'm talking to, what state, we'll start with the United States, no matter what state, behaviors continue. Student misbehavior, let me be specific, and teachers, administrators, school districts not knowing what to do about said misbehaviors. It's really not, if it's one misbehavior, it seems like there's a pretty straight line of this is what we do. When this happens, this is how we handle it. It is these chronic misbehaviors that occur over and over and over again, and oftentimes escalate, that seem to be the ones that everybody is not knowing how to manage those. And I will say, I said every state in the United States, at least people I'm talking to, I haven't talked to anyone out of every state. But I think the thing that was surprising to me is that as I have started talking to educators in other countries, it's there too. So, what do we do about it? I mean, this is my question, my overarching question for myself and for the system. How do we manage behavior?
Yeah. Um, I I don't have the answers for sure. I do know what I do in my own class. Overall, I haven't had a lot of behaviors. Um, I've had some kids with, IEPs and different needs education wise, um, and some very specific and say maybe on the spectrum or some with possibly dyslexia or other things that we don't really address anymore in the public school setting. But then I've had a couple of really highly emotional kids, and in just the last couple of years, I've had a student like slam my hand with a binder and throw a pencil at me across the room that grazed the top of my head. I just set a very firm boundary. I'm not going to accept that as a choice, and really worked on building. I know it sounds trite, kind of building the relationship with that student, seeing where, like, what was causing him to feel so frustrated, but then direct all of his anger at me. I am the safe place for him to direct the anger to, because he didn't know how to manage that. Whether it was he didn't want to do some assignment, writing would be a trigger, even though as a fourth and fifth grader, we have to be able to write an essay, um, and math. So it's been a journey, but then across the hall, you see the kids that are like running out and slamming doors and saying the most inappropriate things at an elementary school. A lot of energy is being put in. And also, as we've got like possibly a lot of resources are going to be taken away, even though we just got these resources in place with counselors and psychologists.
So let's pause there for a moment. They're being
Sure.
taken away because of the levy.
Possibly, yes.
Yes.
We are running the levy again, and we're hoping, because there was such a small margin, I think it was down to only 63-person difference.
So continue. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on, I thought that's what you
Yes.
meant by potentially
Yes.
losing
So, right.
resources. Yeah.
Um, and there are other budget issues. Everything costs more now. Um, our budgets for like office supplies have been slashed like in half, which even up till this point, they haven't changed for like 20 years. The amount of office supply money given to each school has been the same for that amount of time. And now they're slashing that budget, which is crazy. So like when, we need to make copies. Um, oh, well, we can shift back to putting things on technology, but we all know that putting kids in front of screens is not in their best interest. And there have been major studies that have just come out explaining and saying, pull back, get them off the technology. Yeah, we're in a hard place right now.
It really is, because there's like all the options are crap, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's not like, well, we have this good option over here, and maybe it's just like hard to achieve that. It's like, no, these are all not great options, and we have to choose one of them. I'm very interested in the technology piece that you just mentioned as well, that we are wanting students to spend more time on technology. I'm interested in the cost comparison. So we're saying we don't have the money to make copies to do this assignment, but we're also willing to pay the price with the student. And actually, I mean, I suppose there's a dollar sign to that as well. The more they're on technology, the more wear and tear the technology gets. So,
right. And the money that funded every student having technology is also going away. So I mean, it's definitely a lose-lose situation across
so
the board.
why is the technology going away?
Well, so
I mean, I'm
the
sorry,
funds,
not why is the technology going
so
away, but why is the
the
funding going
funds,
away?
because it was the funds from COVID that bought the technology.
That makes sense. You know,
Yeah.
I have a love-hate with technology in the school system anyway, simply because a lot of times I've been provided with technology pieces that I had no idea how to use,
Right.
or it didn't work the way it was supposed to, and I needed to wait for somebody who knew how to use it to come in and train me or to fix something, and then I'd go a whole school year and that never happened.
Yes.
So again, I think that if we were to really take apart some of the things that go on in education, especially when we start talking about money and funding and how are we paying for this resource or that one, a lot of it comes to a mismanagement of funding and not a clear thought out plan as to what the unintended consequences of certain spending is going to have. And for sure, technology spending has to be funded in a way where there is a bridge to the technology and the user to have the expectation that students, teachers, administrators, office staff, whoever, librarians, boy librarians get hit with it a lot, are just going to magically know how to train everybody how to use a technology piece, or that we're all going to be able to teach ourselves is probably not the greatest pathway. This kind of stuff just really drives me crazy because so I'm going to go a little off track here and tell you that I am amazed at the quality of education that my daughter is getting right now. She goes to a school here in Portugal. And we chose to put her in a Portuguese school as opposed to a school where they spoke English. So she kind of had trial by fire. And we made the choice to have her repeat fourth grade for this reason, so that she pretty much knew the curriculum, but she would learn the language. What I was not prepared for is the organization skills that she now has. The She learned cursive because that's all they write in. Her math skills are far better. She does know her math facts now, and she didn't know them going in, even though I tried to work with her, I don't know how many times. And I would say the big difference is they have zero technology, none. And everything they do, they have to write. And so, I go back and forth on this because I do enjoy project based learning. I do like using all of the modalities. As a teacher, I get that we are not all creatures who can sit in a seat for sometimes even 20 minutes and do a task. I get all of that in my head. But I will tell you, I have never seen children at this age in my entire 15 years of teaching, my entire 20 plus years as an educator, produce the things that they are producing. She has a notebook in there right now that is just for history. And she can tell you, as a matter, my husband said something the other day and he used a Portuguese word, and I'm not even going to try to repeat it. And my daughter stopped what she was doing and said, that's a mountain range in Portugal. I said, how did you know that? She has a whole notebook that is Portuguese history. We go for walks in the evening, and she tells us stories about the kings and queens and princes and the different wars in Portugal. And it's all in her little notebook. This is a kid, honestly, she never did this kind of thing in school ever before this. Her handwriting is neat as a pin now. Like I said, she's just really organized. And we've we've missed the boat somewhere. We are not tapping into some neural pathways. We were at one time, but we've stopped with technology. I don't know what they are. I have not done the research behind it, but man, I can't believe the difference for her.
I was a quick learner and a talker. When math got hard in junior high school, then it was hard for me because I don't think I had ever seen really failure up until that point. Very much what I'm finding is an ambivalent attitude, which I find really interesting considering they're only in fourth and fifth grade. I didn't hit that until I was like a junior in high school. Like they're questioning, why do we have to learn this? Why is this important? And and it's thrown me every time one of my students says that to me, because I immediately, go into my head and I'm thinking, where is this coming from? Why don't they think that learning is important? Knowing how to do math, and we're just talking basic math at this point. Or why do they have to be able to write? Why is that important? And everything. So for me, everything does not have to be exciting when we're learning. Sometimes we have to do the hard work.
Yep.
I am not. I don't put on a dog and pony show. I'm not there to entertain. Um, Sometimes things are entertaining, but I am there to teach. That's a societal problem.
I'm going to agree with you on that.
I've thought about this a lot. So teach what teachers need and what like the world is seeing and thinks are like so divergent,
Mhm.
um that that unless we like crash the system, I don't know how it's, and I'm not saying crash the system as in like public education goes away. I mean like we just like we need to stop and reboot.
We rework it. And yeah, so that was one of the things that I said in the intro actually for my book is that it's the foundation is teachers. I'm not saying that out of a place of ego. I am saying you don't have a school system without us.
Right.
So this is the layer, and that's why, again, that's why we're doing what we're doing today, is because we've got to start talking about it with each other. Nobody's listening to
Yeah.
this. Nobody gives a
No.
shit about it except other teachers. But other teachers are listening to this because I give a little thing on my podcast that shows me who's listening and where they're at. And I'm like, ooh,
Right.
that is not anyone I know. That is
Right.
someone I do not know because that's an area of the world that I don't know people in. So I don't know if people are sharing it or what that's looking like. But yeah, I hope people share it because people do need to know.
I think that, you know, I think that looking at data is good to guide, but looking at data and then it informs like the community about your school, or because, oh, your test scores are low. And then like so much is driven, like the cost of housing around a school that is doing poorly, or are very commodity based lifestyle where, big business is involved in state testing and driving that and funding that. Um, and then the things that are attached to scores versus what's really happening in the classroom, teachers not being heard or respected for their opinion, or not, I wouldn't even say for their expertise. I'm not going to say opinion, for their expertise in what is happening with students, with children. And I just saw a meme that said like children haven't changed. Children are still children. It's adults that have let children be on technology or something, and that's the change or whatever. And yes, but that's also been driven by society. And have more, get something bigger, get something better. If we could stop state testing, if we could just realize that teaching children to be the best that they can be. And everything is not necessarily driven by a test score or a grade. It can be demoralizing. It informs so many things about how you go forward into teen years and young adulthood, even as an adult, depending on your path. Some people, education comes very easy to them and life seems to take an easier path. Others of us have to pull and climb and scrape our way through. And we are doing a disservice at this point to children across the board, across the United States, when we have a test that is too hard. Everything, they just push down like what we're learning in fifth grade now versus what we were learning 10 years ago, what the expectation is for the math, what they're supposed to know by the end of fifth grade, used to be what was supposed to, be accomplished by the end of sixth grade. It's really challenging. At this point, we're not meeting students where they're at. We're pushing forward and we're driving the same bus, but we need to get on a different route at this point.
I often wonder what would happen if we just had one test at the end of the year and nobody got to see the results except for the teachers. Parents don't see it, kids don't see that test result. You still have your grades, you know how you did. But
Yep.
here's this one test. It lets us know if our curriculum is hitting these milestones that we'd like for it to. Lets us know if the students are getting what we need them to get, and we just use that data for that. And
Right.
that's it. As you're talking about this, I can see that this is a heart point for you.
It is. I reflect on this a lot. I reflect on it, but we're stuck. We go and the wheel keeps spinning and time keeps marching on. The same kids are running in the hallway, though not maybe to the extent that they were at the beginning of the year, but it's still happening. Measures are put in place for support, but it's not enough. And it's not there's not been a drastic enough change in anything to help where we are with public education. And we can think, and all your teacher friends, we all get together and we talk, and we've got so many wonderful, great ideas of things that we possibly could do if there was a way to get admin, our politicians that are making all of the laws on board.
Okay, so you're leading me. You are setting me up for the 3 for the road. What's the one thing you would change immediately in education if you could? It's a magic wand. Anything you want, one thing, go.
I would stop teaching the math that I'm teaching right now and pause everybody. I would have to assess where everyone's at, and then I would fill in the holes for each of those students. Whatever they're missing, whatever they didn't get, possibly as far back as first grade, we would start there.
I think that's such a powerful answer, Jen, because you know what that speaks to? That speaks to teaching the child. It doesn't speak to fitting into any systemic mold that's being given to us. It is this teaching and learning should go hand in hand, and they should be about getting kids to the next level, whatever that may be for them, giving those building blocks, helping them have the tools they need to learn the things they want to learn. Because in fourth and fifth grade, we're getting to the end of that, really. We're getting to that place where you're going to have to start choosing what's important to you and what you want to learn. This is always a tough question for me to ask because I know for so many of us, I mean, honestly, just the stuff that you're talking about, and you've been very light and very forgiving and very professional about things that honestly, when you and I worked in the same building for a couple of years, and we saw some stuff then. And you've been very gracious. But when we see kids tantruming sometimes that are 10, 11 years old or bullying other educators, like children bullying the adults or destroying property, and we'll call them repeat offenders, it does have a trauma effect on us as educators, as well as the kids that are around it. And some of those things can get pretty scary pretty fast. And I'm not saying that any of these is going to be your answer to this question, but I feel a little guilty for asking it because every teacher I know has experienced some sort of tragedy or trauma. It is because of the nature of what we do. Tell me about one of the most tragic or traumatic things you've witnessed directly due to being an educator,
Um,
to your comfort level.
oh, there are so many. So I could speak about a couple of different things. Um, I had a student many years ago who was not in district. He was tough. He needed a lot of my like one-on-one. In fact, if I could have just been his like teacher tutor person, we would have gone far, but I had, 27 other kids in the classroom at that time. And he got in trouble. He had to go to his homeschool in the other district. And that was hard. He went on and he was okay. But I was so worried because of what he was exposed to at home and what everything was like for him. And I invested a lot of time and energy into that student. And it was, the things that transpired were not in my control at all. Um, that tends to be the case for me. Anyways, when the students are with me in the class, they are safe and they tend to make, generally good choices and are okay. But when they're at recess or at in the cafeteria or in the hallway, not in my presence, they they it's like they forget what how they're supposed to manage themselves. And then, that was not in my control that he made those choices and then was forced to move.
Right. You know, so I'm hearing too, you had your connection severed without your permission. So,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I think those kiddos always get our heart because we see when you set up the right structures and you build the relationship, you can actually see them having those successful moments. And then as soon as they are outside of that structure and they have not been implicitly taught how to be in the new structure and they don't have a relationship with the adults that are in charge, it typically leads to some behavior issues.
Yes. Yep. Um, the other thing on a very personal level, my 8-year-old son goes to school with me. Um, and when he was in kindergarten, there was a student in his room that caused room clearing events to happen and also screamed often throughout the day. Um, and I think that the trauma that was and all my students upstairs knew, like everyone in the building knew that student.
Yeah.
But those little children in that room, there was trauma involved in witnessing and hearing that day in, day out. And, hands are tied across the board. Administrators' hands are tied on what they can do. The supports for students that have behavior, there aren't any, or the choices are not options that end up helping in any way. I don't know what the answer is. I've heard some interesting thoughts from other parents, and it's possibly one of those things that it's going to take a village, and some strong methods, I guess you could say, with policies and politicians,
Yeah.
um, to get those things to change.
Yeah. Kindergarten, I mean, that developmentally, that's a long time for them to have to be going through that day in and day out.
Yes.
To balance out speaking about trauma and tragedy, I think we both agree kids are hilarious. What's one of the funniest things you've experienced as an educator?
I've been I'm like, what is the funniest thing? Oh, a story that always sticks in my brain. It was after I had Oliver. He was like a year and a half old, and I was reading aloud to a group of students, like my highest readers. And I'm reading, and they're like, it doesn't say that. And I'm like, it does too. And I think I read it like 5 more times. And they're like, "It doesn't say that." And I said, "Yes, it does." And then I adjust the book so that I can see a little bit better, and it did not say, and the word that I was saying made it very hilarious. And after that, I started wearing glasses. And that's just a small story. I was talking to my class about that, because I'm like, "Has there been anything really funny?" One funny thing this year is, a student of mine, their whole family moved to Italy back in October, and they gave us their fish and fish tank with it's a heated fish tank, so they're tropical fish of some sort. Well, I hadn't cleaned the tank in a while, and I usually would have students because, doing some work in our classroom. We have an economy and they have jobs, but we hadn't cleaned the fish tank and there was algae. And one student daily would say to me, "You're going to kill the fish. You're going to kill the fish," every day. And that went on for like a month. And finally, we cleaned the fish tank. So um, now he's like, he asks me other things, but he's funny kiddo.
And clearly cares a lot about the fish. All right, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And that is you walk into the staff room and you want to get some water from the faucet, but the sink is full of dirty dishes. Whose responsibility is it in the school to clean those dirty dishes?
Um, Everyone should be taking care of their own dirty dishes. And um, there has been, well, this school year, I think I've only eaten in the lunchroom like 5 times. But in the past, when there have been dishes, and I would be usually back then when I was eating often in the lunchroom, last lunch, and so one of us would usually clear the sink. One person in particular, a male teacher, he would go over and start cleaning and say, "Why can't people take care of their own things?" Um, and then we would all kind of joke through that of him taking care of that business for all of us. So,
I'm going to ask this question and keep asking it, and it is kind of a public service announcement. So, educators, if you are out there listening, so far, every person I have interviewed has said that it is the person who dirtied the dish. So, why are we leaving our dirty dishes in the sink instead of cleaning it before you leave? I'm going to keep asking. Maybe somebody will have a different answer. We'll see. Jen, is there anything else that you would like to leave us with as we bring our podcast to a close?
as teachers, we have value. We spend more time with kids than they're sometimes spending with their own families. And it would be fabulous in a perfect world if we could get back to the place where we were held in a higher esteem.
I agree with that. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I wish I knew.
Educators at all levels know that sometimes students need more than what any one educator can give them. As the proverb states, it takes a village. In the Loop Education can be part of that village. With more than 20 years of educational expertise in public and private school systems spanning multiple countries and 3 continents, Isabel De La Tour, founder and operator of In the Loop Education, can be a vital part of a student's learning community. She offers services as mentor, tutor, and liaison for international students and families navigating the education systems in the UK, US, and a portion of Europe. As Isabel states, understanding the curriculum, associated qualifications, and progression paths to further education is not always straightforward. Isabel and In the Loop Education are here to help students find that straightforward pathway. You can find In the Loop Education on Facebook and on Instagram at In the Loop EDU. See today's show notes for links to
I
both.
wish I knew.
Hey there. Before I sign off, I want to say, if you liked today's episode, and since you're still with me, I'll assume you did, be sure to check out my 3-part series featuring Kelly on special education teacher burnout. Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez. If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small, independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, tot.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaru said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa LaFleur. Thank you for listening to Tot, the podcast.
I wish I knew.